So, overall impressions of our day of judging. Sarah, what do you take away from this?
I have very positive impressions overall. I've been coming here for about 10 years, and compared to the first time I came 10 years ago, I'd say the overall quality, the consistency, the diversity is so much greater. I really liked the greater number of particularly fresh red wines. So I would say that I think lots of the work that I know has been going on in the last 10 years is really starting to pay off now. So very positive impressions.
Great. Ali, you have vast experience in wine, but actually your first visit to Istanbul, what was your impression?
It's overall very similar to Sarah. I was very, very impressed, actually. More impressed than I expected to be, which is always positive. And I can be pretty...
He's quite
demanding.
Demanding, but and I was, again, I think for me, certainly it was the indigenous varieties that were far more interesting than the international varieties. That's more interesting, show more potential, and especially the lighter style of reds, but equally some very, very fresh white grape varieties, indigenous grape varieties. And they really did show the diversity of terroir that there is here. And having Sarah explain to me as well the different regions as we were tasting was also, it made a lot of sense. So overall, I was really, really very impressed.
And Kat, you've got huge experience in the retail network of the UK. These wines are not well known in the UK retail scene. What's your sort of takeaway from this?
My takeaway is that there is so much for customers and actually just the UK as a whole to discover. I think the thing that really surprised me was the sheer number of grape varieties that was on taste today, not just in terms of the indigenous grapes, but actually in terms of international ones as well. So it wasn't just Cabernet, Merlot, Syrah. We had Montepulciano, we had Nero d'Avola, there was Malbec, it was literally like tasting the grapes of the world in a day. And that was just really fascinating for a country to be experimenting in so many different ways and offering so many different things. As a wine consumer, as a wine lover, there's plenty to dive into and kind of get to know.
Absolutely.
So, Sarah, we talked about the sheer number of varieties that we have before us in our glasses today, and you're very familiar with many of those varieties. Tell us what really shone for you today.
I thought the really bright, fresh reds, especially the indigenous reds of Turkey, were the stars today. And for those, I would pick out things like Kalecik Karası, which is like the kind of a cross between the Gamay or Pinot Noir of Turkey. And it's a really versatile variety. We had some delicious Kalecik Karası, both in lighter styles and more intense oak styles. But then we tasted a lot of varieties that actually I'd only tasted for the first time a couple of months ago. So Papaskarasi and some Hazandede, for example, which I think shows a lot of promise. And also, I think that there were some more established indigenous varieties that are really coming into their own now. And of that, I would pick out Emir, the white grape. We had some sensational wines from Emir. I think we even had a gold, actually, from Emir. And they weren't just wines that, this is interesting, it's a flavour that's new to me. It was absolutely delicious, really intense, complex wine.
On the whites as well, I thought that Narinje, forgive my pronunciation.
No, it's perfect.
Narinje, there we go. Narinje was fascinating, showed real freshness and vibrancy, sort of almost without wanting to... For me, not knowing the grape varieties, I sort of liken them to other international grape varieties, of Albarino-esque, really fresh, vibrant, salty, saline, and I thought that was great. And some of the lighter red styles as well, indigenous varieties, showed real promise. I kept, again, likening them to international varieties, Sanso, Gamay, Pinot, fresh, light, and styles that are really resonating with consumers globally at the moment. So I think there's really, really great potential with those grape varieties.
Yeah, on that, Kat, there were some grape varieties, as Ali said, that really were on the mark and on the money in terms of trends.
Yeah, absolutely. So from my perspective, I'd absolutely echo what you both have said in terms of the lighter, fresher styles of red wine, where really the personality of the grape is what is allowed to shine in the glass. The wines that were most successful on our panel were definitely the ones where there's been restraint in the winery. It's about really ripe fruit, making sure that all of those phenolics are ripe. There's no kind of green notes, but then actually inside the winery, there's not too much oak. Everything is very well balanced, and it's just about the personality of the grape variety. So I think for me, that is where the true potential is. In terms of the international varieties, we had a very interesting flight of Aegean Syrah, so slightly higher altitude. They showed some really bright kind of bubbly fruit characters with a kind of real black olive note, which was delicious. And as I'm told by my Turkish colleagues, it's actually very typical of the region. So, from that perspective, in terms of the international varieties, that would probably be the one that I would pick out.
You mentioned Cab Franc. Really, some lovely wines.
Yeah, very impressive. And again, Cab Franc, I think, is going... Finally, I think I'm right in saying that Cabernet Franc now is becoming more attractive to consumers. There's a bit more of a following, and I think it's great to see. There was some real typicity of the grape variety. And and another thing, touching on what Kat said, is that I was expecting, and I'm glad to find I was mistaken, I was expecting a little bit more abuse of oak, should I say. So really heavy oaky wines. And there are a few wines that I think were probably a little heavy-handed with the oak.
10 years ago, you would have definitely found that.
Well, yeah, but do you know what? How refreshing is that? Because I think, refreshing in the literal and figurative sense, because I think producers have clearly listened to trends, global trends, that really isn't what the market demands at the moment. So I was really pleased to see that.
And actually, I think for Turkey, this kind of 2-track offer of these really intriguing ancient varieties that no one's ever heard of, but that have been in this land for centuries, is a really lovely offer for connoisseurs, for adventurous wine consumers, to get the trade engaged, to get geeks like us all excited. But then having another track where it's, actually, this is a Syrah. I like Syrah. Or, a Malbec. Oh, I love Malbec. Oh, here's a Turkish one. It's like 2 tracks coming in. And actually, I think that's really useful. So it's almost like you've got the experimentation and the playfulness and the openness of the new world. And then you've got this very authentic, ancient, almost viticultural heritage that you associate really with one of the cradles of wine.
Yeah.
So I think both exist very happily together.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Turkish wines, very much a discovery for me, to be honest, in recent years. In the retail landscape, Kat, what's the presence of Turkish wines?
Well, at the moment, being very honest and very direct about it, there really isn't a presence for Turkish wine within large-scale UK retail. And actually for that consumer, so the consumer who shops in a sort of supermarket or a large multiple specialist, they probably don't even have any awareness of Turkish wine. So if you stopped an average Mr. Smith in the street in the UK and said, what do you think about Turkish wine? The first question would probably be, do Turkey make wine? So really, there's a huge amount of opportunity there because there's no prejudice that you need to overcome. It's a blank slate to introduce new wines, new styles, and have a conversation with a customer. But equally, it means it's that much more challenging to actually initiate that conversation because you've got, to actually engage their attention first and foremost. Probably get over a little bit of prejudice in terms of, does Turkey even make wine? So it will be challenging, but there is huge opportunity there.
And Sarah, you've done your bit already to raise the profile of Turkish wines, but have you been basically starting from scratch?
Well, not exactly from scratch. So a few years ago, the producers did do some activity in the UK, which I think got them over the first hurdle of at least engaging the trade. But the trade that really focused on speciality, on-trade, restaurants, independent wine retail. So you do have some really good Turkish wines imported, and they're retailed but by the specialists. So people like Novel Wine in Bath, for example, are a Turkish specialist. Graft Wine, which is a fantastic specialist wine importer, they offer Turkish wines. So there are some specialist online shops that do offer Turkish wine, but it's really at that absolute discovery stage. And I think the producers, if they can work together and almost create their own combined communication, and I actually think they're primed to really start to do well. I think that they must focus first on building reputation in the specialty market. So that means focusing with specialist importers, getting into the on-trade, getting into independent retail so people can story tell. I think it will be another 15 years of kind of sustained effort before you sort of see, Turkish Kuşgözü or maybe a Kuşgözü Syrah blends, in the likes of Waitrose or Majestic. But I think they could do it. But first you have to build the awareness and prestige story, which happens with the on-trade and specialist retail.